Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Agree or Disagree the podcast, the hockey podcast edition. It is Saturday. We are back. It's been quite a week. That just with the Vancouver Canucks, it's never really a slow news day. There is always something going on at some point in time, and this week was no different. So we got lots to get into. We've got from Terrace. He was, as we are getting set up, filling out his referee report. Is everything okay, Tyler? Or is everyone happy with the officiating?
Everybody was angry. Everybody was surly. Playoff hockey in the Central Interior Hockey League got a little bit crazy there with one player going ballistic on a stick smashing thing. But yeah, the report's all filled out and on to game 2 tonight. Prince Rupert with another crew.
Nice. Good luck. Refereeing is not an easy job. Sean, how are you?
I'm good. It's slowly getting out of the deep freeze, but we got another dump of snow out here in Calgary.
Yes. We've got a ton of snow out here too. It has not melted, but it is a little bit warmer than it was. But yeah, it's been a crazy week. It's made it a longer week this week. Joining us this week from Canucks Army is Tyler Shipley. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for asking me to do this, you guys. It's been just brutal out here in Toronto in terms of the winter. And I know I know he's just saying Toronto, like I shouldn't be complaining. I'm from Winnipeg, so I should never, ever be complaining about Toronto. But, man, it has just been nuts. We've had, 3 snowpocalypses already. The city goes into shutdown. It's a bit like Vancouver. As soon as there's any snow at all, no one here knows what to do. So yeah, I'm just, keeping my head above water out here.
Yeah.
I feel like the lake effects there create an interesting winter. I was there once in wintertime, and it was brutal, too. And a guy from northern BC, same thing. It's just I don't know, it kind of feels wrong to complain, but
I know I feel guilty every time I complain about it. And my family back home, it's minus 40, and here I am whining about, it's minus 10 and there's snow, but it's like the city just isn't built for it. None of the buildings are insulated properly. None of the roads make sense for plowing. It's just it's really quite a shambles, truthfully. So I'm just hanging on to get through until March so that we can get back to normal life.
Well, I say this, I don't know about you, Tyler, but I say this to people in Alberta. When you complain about the weather, and it's you're right, it's not minus 20, but I kind of think when it's minus 5, it feels like minus 15 out here. It's it feels like 10 degrees colder than what it actually is. I don't know if you feel the same way about Toronto, Tyler, but that's...
Oh, totally. I mean, I get this deep chill, this cold that goes into my bones when I'm here. Back home in Winnipeg, you step outside and it's the cold is punching you in the face. But then as soon as you get inside, you warm up quickly and it feels like the place is designed to handle it. But here, it just sinks into your guts are freezing.
Yeah. Yeah. How are you, before we get on, what is your opinion on the umbrella in the snow? Do you get that in Toronto? Because I saw this here in Vancouver, and I was weirded out at first, but I actually think it's actually a pretty effective way to deal with the snow.
It's got to be a Vancouver thing because I've never seen it here. I feel like that's the one thing Toronto can say we have over Vancouver is we haven't quite sunk to the depths of the umbrella in the snow. I've never seen it, so I don't know, man.
It's quite. I thought it was weird, but it's actually it's kind of practical. Maybe
I'll give it a go. Nothing else is working. So.
I'm imagining. You got to prepare for a couple of parades out there. The NBA championship and the Stanley Cup championship that coming.
Oh yeah. I mean, basically, we've already got all the jackets. And by the way, hold on. I shouldn't say I don't want to say we here. I am not a Toronto sports fan. I live here, but I despise the Leafs. I just want to make sure everyone knows where I stand on this important issue.
Fair enough.
Utterly despise the Leafs. I find it so frustrating that, that if I'm honest, I think they're run really well and they actually are putting together a good team. But it irritates the hell out of me. And I like the Blue Jays. because we were all sort of Blue Jays fans when we were kids, I think. But I definitely don't sort of rah around Toronto sports. I don't want anyone to get the wrong impression.
Oh, don't worry. We've hit the Leafs pretty hard here.
Good.
Yeah. Well, we were going to start with something else, but something else happened. So.
And for those of you in the building,
oh wait, I did that wrong. Let's try that again.
We have a trade to announce.
Yes, we have a trade to announce. Ryan Spooner is coming from Edmonton to Vancouver in exchange to a guy that actually was playing with the Toronto Marlies, Sam Gagner. Interestingly, Gagner has been called up by the Oilers and is en route to Brooklyn and is expected to be in the lineup tonight against the New York Islanders. So we'll start here. What are your guys' thoughts on this trade from the Vancouver perspective? We'll start there, and whoever wants to start, what are you thinking?
I think it's an interesting trade. Sam Gagner's time was up in Vancouver after he got called up that first time after being waived after training camp, and didn't really get a long look. I think they were looking for a spot for him to move on from him. And Ryan Spooner's an interesting player. He's scored at like a second line rate up until this season, where he's just fallen off a cliff. And I think he'll add depth. The only issue now is what roster move do the Canucks make to make room for him? Because they've got Adam Gaudette and Zach McEwen up that they can send back down to Utica without waivers. What's the status of Jake Virtanen? Because they might be able to put him on injured reserve to make room for Ryan Spooner, or do they finally move on from one of the veterans that are taking up spots for these young players that everyone is clamoring for?
Yeah, both players needed a change of scenery. It's been a disappointing year for both, being buried in the minors. It was good for the Canucks to have Sam Gagner as a guy they could pluck out of the minors if things were going really poorly, like it was when they had that run of 12 out of 13 games that they lost or whatever. Gagner came up and helped. As a veteran, you can bring out of the minor league system, but obviously his time with the Canucks was basically over. Jim Benning drafted Spooner, so there's some past history there. He feels comfortable bringing him in, and he kind of has a sense of what he's getting there. I would think that, Tim Schaller can't seem to get into the lineup despite all the injuries for the Canucks. You'd have to wonder if he's at risk now of going on waivers and having his time with the Canucks be over. Zach McEwen would be the easiest roster move without waivers, so we'll see what they decide. But I like the move for both teams, but particularly Vancouver. It's another option, a fresh face to bring in to try and spark the team.
Yeah, I think I agree with you guys. To me, it's a bit of a nothing trade. There's nothing lost from the Canucks standpoint insofar as as you both said, they've clearly moved on from Gagner, and I'm not heartbroken about it. I think there's been times this year where I've thought, like, there are players in our lineup that could be replaced by Gagner, and it would be a step up. So at times I've been sort of not sure what I thought of the burying of Gagner, but he was buried, and that's clear. So in that sense, it's like there was nothing to lose by moving him. And they haven't taken a hit in terms of the cap. As I understand it, the Rangers actually still retain something like 20% of Spooner's. So it's a sideways move in terms of cap. It's pretty much exactly the same. You have the option now of does Spooner find his game again? I kind of don't think he's gonna. Like, I haven't seen much of him this year, but he's got like 5 points in 40 something games. So I kind of doubt that it's going to be that there's going to be much of an effect of having him there. But as I think it was Sean just said, Tim Schaller, what's he doing? He's been scratched for half the season, I think, and there's no harm at this stage in waving Schaller to see if Spooner can be, an improvement. So I like it. I'm fine with it.
Yeah, it's not like it's not drastic. It's not. I mean, Sean and I were joking before everyone got on. It's like the Oilers are going back to rebuild 1 as opposed to rebuild 3. But yeah, I mean, we don't know how long Brandon Sutter is going to be out. He might be out for a bit, so I can see him being sort of a replacement for that. You have another guy that can do similar Brandon Sutter type of things, but we'll get into a little bit a guy that probably can do better Brandon Sutter type things. It's to me. I think the guy that is hurt the most of this is probably Tim Schaller, and I don't think anyone's going to be too heartbroken about it.
Just in regards to Jake Virtanen quickly here, I was waiting on the extent of his injury. I mean, the Canucks don't play until Thursday after their game tonight in San Jose, so they got some time to get the roster situation figured out.
Yeah. Sean, you were suspecting probably later this week we would be getting a Spooner call-up?
I think so, but I just saw a tweet from Rick Dhaliwal saying that Spooner's going directly to Vancouver, not to Utica. So I think we'll see a roster move. I think he's probably papered still in the AHL, but I think what we'll see is a move here within the next day or two to see that, which means I think we'll see like a Schaller wave or Zach McEwen sent down or Virtanen on the IR. I think those are the 3 most likely. Virtanen's not on the ice for line rushes this morning, so I think that one of those 3, and maybe Virtanen to the IR is the most likely, at least short-term move. Yeah,
we'll get into Zach McEwen a little bit later, but I think I think the quick thing now is it's hard to take this guy down after what he's done. I think he's got off to a good start, but we'll get into him a little bit later. There was the first half of the week was met with a little bit of a controversy because most of everyone was a little bit surprised by who started on Monday. Not us, because we already had a discussion about this. We were wondering when Michael Dipietro would start, but he ended up starting on Monday. Here was Travis Green after the game, the 7-2 game, Monday against the San Jose Sharks.
Obviously, we had 2 young guys go into their game and play their first game. And we had a few unlucky bounces to start the game, and it was unfortunate for Mike. And I thought he hung in there and battled.
Can you walk us through the goaltending situation, sort of as you understand it, and when did you know that Markstrom was not available?
I knew after he got off the ice in the morning skate, and luckily you guys didn't ask me in the morning who was starting for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, I was wondering if we all just missed that, and
Yeah, you did. It was kind of nice.
So was Dipietro your only option to play tonight?
No. Well, what do you mean?
Was Markstrom available?
Yes, but I didn't feel comfortable putting him in. I was not going to put him in tonight if I didn't have to.
So that whole conversation and what happened there sent Canuck Nation, Canuck media spinning around a little bit. And it did lead to another trade at the acquisition of Marek Malistov later in the week for a 7th-round pick in 2020. I probably butchered that guy's name. But anyway, they got an AHL goalie to back up Jacob Markstrom. So let's go back here. First of all, the 2 things that have been coming up have been, how has this hurt Michael Dipietro? And some people think Benning was caught with his pants down here a little bit. So I'd like to start with Tyler Shipley here. Tyler asks, what, from your perspective, because we haven't heard from you yet, that's why I thought I'd start from you on this one, but what did you think of this?
I did think that it was a bad look for the organization. I did think that it sort of exposed, to me, I think it exposed a kind of, a lack of, long-term sort of planning and preparation for a situation like that. I mean, look, I'm not worried about Dipietro. It's unfortunate for the kid, but if that alone was going to derail his career, I mean, good God, right? So he'll be fine. He'll learn from it. That's not a problem. I think what was sort of seemed silly about it was actually the very fact that Benning is able to go out the very next day and solve the problem, which to me illustrated that he easily could have done that at any time in the previous, 4 weeks or 3 weeks, 4 weeks or whatever it had been since Demko had got hurt. So, I mean, I don't think it's a big deal. I do think there was an overreaction to it because it ultimately won the game, and I'm not of the mind that the Canucks are in a real playoff race. So I wasn't super concerned about what went down. I just think it looked bad, and there's so much talk around Vancouver about team culture. What does team culture mean? How much does team culture matter? How much of that kind of stuff has an effect in the dressing room and so on? And at some level, I think it's things like that actually do sometimes. I mean, if you're a player and you notice that the organization is suddenly scrambling and the coach is in a weird position where he sort of, 1 minute he's saying, I don't want to throw a guy in there if he's not ready, and then the next minute he's throwing a guy in there and having to say, well, sure, he'll be fine. It kind of just felt like a screw-up at some level, and you got to think the players noticed it a little bit. So I didn't love it. I also don't want to blow it out of proportion. I think it was one little thing. It's not going to change the season. It's not going to change Dipietro's trajectory, I don't think, at all. So that would be my take on it.
By the way, the pronunciation of his name is Marek Mazanek, so sorry about the butchering, but anyway.
That was a very Don Cherry move.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was calling Cherry for the mispronunciation before, and there I go with whatever I came up with.
I agree with Tyler in the fact that if you look back at the amount of time Benning and the Canucks had to pick up a backup, whether it's signing someone or finding the right trade, I think it doesn't look good. From what I heard, is it looked like he was shooting a little high with the goalies he was looking at, because I think there was a rumor that he was looking at Tristan Jarry out of Pittsburgh, and they were asking for a 3rd round pick. So, which in all aspects isn't necessarily a bad trade, but when you're in a bit of at the end of the end or middle of a rebuild, depending on where you think the Canucks are, you don't want to be giving up those middle round picks. And yeah, I was never really worried about what happened that game. Michael Dipietro has shown some apps that he does have a really good mental game. He's always working on it. He doesn't ignore it, and he understands how important it is, especially as a goalie. So I don't think that's going to hurt him long term. I think it might even help him, because he'll be able to see where he was overcommitting on a lot of the goals. So yeah, I think it might help him going into next year when he makes a step up into the AHL.
I mean, I liked the post-game interview with Dipietro. His body language, he didn't look particularly rattled. He was just happy to check that box. He made it to the NHL. He played in a real NHL game. Yeah, it didn't go very well, but lots to learn from, lots to build off of. Didn't seem overly rattled by how it went. And, I mean, look, if the Canucks started Markstrom, would they have won that game? No guarantees. I mean, San Jose was a strong team, so I don't know. It's clear that the Canucks didn't want to trade anything to get another goalie in, and they gambled, and that gamble didn't work out for them. They ended up, like we've said, looking like they had their pants down, but they gave it a try. A few people were maybe wondering, let's see what Dipietro can do, and while we saw what we all probably should have expected, a junior goalie playing in the NHL is going to struggle.
It's happened to others. Mike Vernon allowed, I think, 8 goals in his first start. A lot of goalies struggle at first. To me, like the other option that the Canucks had was sign a 37-year-old Michael Leighton, who has proven to not be an NHL goalie. Would it have so? When I looked at it, you're giving I'm with Sean. I think if you gave Dipietro an opportunity to have a little bit of a taste of the NHL, and then you know what he can work on. You're not. I think they looked at it and said, "You're not going to win this game anyway." Could you win with Markstrom? Maybe. You got a free win against the Flames, I guess. You got a free 2 points in a game that maybe some people thought you were not going to win against the Flames. The more important games were Anaheim and LA, where you got 2 out of 4, and you needed Markstrom for that. I think what confused me, though, was Markstrom not being available but being a backup. I was confused by that, and that's not the first time that they've done that, because Demko was the backup when they called Dipietro up on the emergency call. So I'm confused why they have someone that is not available dressed as a backup.
Because he couldn't get anybody else in.
No, I think it was more of a worst comes to worst, and Markstrom got injured, they would be able to throw Demko in, and in this case, if worst comes to worst, and Dipietro got injured, they could throw Markstrom in, but they weren't going to do it in any other situation. They weren't going to throw the Demko or Markstrom in unless the starter was injured.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I agree with you guys that. There's not that much harm, for Dipietro to have a go at it. I think that if it had seemed like this was part of the plan, that we've got Dipietro up and we would like to try to get him a game, and if that had always seemed like the plan, I don't think it would have been a problem. I think we all would have been like, yeah, all right, well, he had to go, and hey, 6 goaltenders have had their first career games be shutouts against the Canucks, right? Right? Yeah. Isn't that what I saw? So, I mean, it who knows? He could have, had a horseshoe up his ass and just had a wonderful game, and it would have been really exciting. And it was the fact that it clearly was not the plan, and that it was a scramble. And that's, I think, that feeling that was around that whole game. That's, for me, the only real bad part of the story is just, as a player on the team, you don't want to feel like the organization is reacting, and being behind the 8 ball on things like this. You want to feel like there's a plan, they know what they're doing, they're on top of it, and, they're running this ship clearly so that you can just focus on, on your game, playing your game, and not doubting, the system or the plan. A thing like that, you got to wonder, especially for bubble players, you got to wonder if it just plants this seed of like, do these people know what they're doing, right? That's the only part of it that I think is a takeaway for me that I don't like. The rest of it, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think I think it was the way. I think it was the communication of it more than the actual execution of it. I think is the conclusion of that, which hasn't been Benning Green's strength. When we talked about that when Trevor Linden left, it's the communication part of it. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see going forward. And it's actually, look around the NHL right now. I mean, Gibson and Johnson were put on the IR in Anaheim. It's getting harder to find goaltenders. And when the Philadelphia Flyers have 240 of them and won't give one up, it's tough.
Well, they'll give one up only to acquire another.
That's fair. That's true. That is a good point. I'm
surprised they haven't dressed Gritty yet.
That'd be great. He's been the best thing of the Flyers all year. It's been awesome. One guy that has been a bit of a lightning rod here in Vancouver is before we get into some of the newer guys and the goaltending situation a little bit more. He did not play in Anaheim, did play in LA, but Nikolai Goldobin has been a topic of should he play or should he go. I'm going to read a little bit of what Tyler has written about in Canucks Army about Goldobin here. Nikolai Goldobin likes his new city. He told us so in his recent TV commercial for Capilano Audi. It's a good commercial, by the way. From the mountains to the ocean and pulsing energy of downtown to the practice rink in Surrey to the press box at Rogers Arena, Nikolai Goldobin is a happy guy. But he doesn't like to be picked on. Who among us does? Last week, this was written in January 23rd, last week Goldobin, still the Canucks' fourth highest scorer, was mired in a lengthy spell of healthy scratches when the Canucks leaked the story about Goldie being shown a series of clips of him not playing tight enough defensively. He reportedly asked, "Why are you picking on me?" I don't know how much truth there is in this story, and I'm not sure why the organization chose to leak it. The predictable response from most fans was to read Goldie as lazy and unwilling to accept that he needs to improve his game. But many of the reporters who follow the team have seen from the 23-year-old winger a genuine commitment to improving. Last season, he spent several months in Utica working on his skating, his defensive game, killing penalties, and earning the praise of his coach, Trent Call. Here's what Travis Green had to say about scratching Nikolai Goldobin earlier. This is from the middle of January as they were heading in to play the Oilers.
I wouldn't say tough love, it's just honest love. I like Goldie. I've said it all along. I like his skill. A lot of people think I just benched him because of the penalty the other night. That wasn't the case.
Not sure what happened there. Basically, it was about tough love, and he was not in tough love. He talked about Goldie having took a penalty. What a lot of people talked about. It wasn't about a penalty. He just wanted Goldie to work on certain things. So I don't know who wants to start here. We've talked a lot about Nikolai Goldobin, Tyler. From your perspective, he was scratched again against Anaheim. He had a great chance to win the game in regulation against LA. So where are you? What are you thinking now after a couple weeks after writing that? What are your reflections on what you're seeing from Goldobin now? Have you changed your mind? Are you still on the same thought process? What are your thoughts?
I think my basic position is the same. My basic position has always been, here's a player who has a skill set that is more rare, I think, than sometimes people realize. An offensive skill set that is rare, and some deficiencies in his defensive game and his play away from the puck. But I think not as bad as it sort of has blown up into seeming. And the Canucks have here, I think, a player that they could really use long term. I think in Goldobin, you have a player who, down the line, could be a really solid middle six winger who could give you depth scoring. Not goals, because he's not a goal scorer; he's a setup guy. But somebody has to set up the goals, and Goldobin is a guy that can do that. I think what's happened this year, and I don't know entirely why. I've got lots of various sort of theories about this, but if I'm as generous as I can be to Travis Green and the organization, I think, they stick him on the line with Petey and Besser, and it goes really well. And it was clicking in November, especially. That line was obviously the Canucks' best line, and they were producing a ton of points, and it was going really well. And then the Levo trade happens, and I think Green takes the opportunity to try to push Goldie in those areas that, he does need to improve. And I kind of think it spiraled out of control. I kind of think that what started as like, hey, let's push Goldie to be a little bit better, doesn't immediately work out. Green gets frustrated because his message isn't getting through. Goldie isn't adjusting quickly enough or effectively enough for Green. And I honestly feel like it sort of becomes this battle where Green is saying, I'm not putting you back in the lineup until you do the things I'm asking. And I believe to do the things that he's being asked to do. I'm just not sure how much he can do those things or how quickly he can do them. I watch him closely. You guys probably know. You follow me on Twitter. I watch Goldie's game really closely. I've become invested, and I see a lot of improvement in those things. I see him back checking harder. I see him stronger on the puck in battles. I see him trying to maintain coverage which was, in my opinion, one of his real weaknesses was losing his coverage, not knowing where to be defensively. I see improvements there. And what I'm concerned about is that although you're seeing some incremental improvements on that side of it, he's lost his confidence in the area where we need him, which is in the offensive zone, making passes, making breakout passes, setting. He still leads the team in primary shot assists. That's what we need from Goldie. And, him missing that open net the other night. Look, it was a tough play. I don't think Tyler Mott would have scored it either. But Goldie at his best buries that. And I think he's squeezing his stick. He's nervous. He's overthinking. I kind of feel like both Travis and Nikolai have sort of gotten too far into this and need to sort of, get back on the same page somehow. So I hope the Canucks stick it out with him. I hope the organization truly does trust him and give him a little bit more rope, a little bit more leash to work with, because I think there's a ton of skill there. And it could be a real boon for the Canucks down the line, 3-4 years from now, when we have some better players, when Goldie isn't the fourth scorer on the team. Goldie should be 6th or 7th, but he should be getting 30 or 40 points from a second or third line wing. That's what I want out of Goldie long term. So that's what I'm hoping for. We'll see. At some level, it's hard to predict right now.
So Travis Green goes on to that clip, and he basically says in the game, in that game specifically, if the game was if they were down 2-1, they would be playing Goldie more. If they were ahead 2-1, they wouldn't be playing Goldie as much. So that tells me that he's not seeing defense from him, and so that's what he needs a little bit more from him. But you're saying you're seeing enough improvement that he should be playing more in a defensive-ish role?
No, not necessarily. I don't think Goldie should be put in defensive roles. He's never going to be a defensive specialist, and I think it would be weird to expect that of him. It would be like expecting Tyler Mott to be able to go on a top 6 into a top 6 role and score a bunch. He's not gonna. That's not his game. I'm okay with Goldie being an offensive specialist. I'm okay with him needing to improve, his play away from the puck and his defense. That is definitely real. But look, if Travis says we're down by a goal, we're up by a goal and we want to protect a lead, so Goldie's on the bench, I can live with that. That's not my beef necessarily. My beef is scratching Goldie, multiple times now, 8 times I think now, in order to try to get this message through to him that he has to be more defensively responsible. I just think that's taken it too far. A couple games along the way to really send a message, sure, that's fine, but I think what's happened is he's lost his offensive flair. He's lost his confidence with the puck, and so now fans are and the market is really, as you say, because his defense is never going to be amazing, but even his offense has dried up. So that's, for me, the concern. I think you've got to use Goldie effectively. Use him in the role that makes sense for him. That's what I'd like to see.
Yeah, it's a good point that you make there about the number of times he's been scratched. Once as a message sender, it can have an effect, but maybe it's getting to the point now where he's afraid to make a mistake because he's going to be a scratch again. And I never really thought of it that way myself. But the other night I missed an open net late against, I believe it was in the LA game. You start to wonder now: is that the lack of confidence starting to show right on the offensive side because of how things?
Yeah,
that's still so good. You got to stick with them.
Yeah, the other thing with Goldie is I don't think they quite have the right personnel to surround him with. I know Tyler Shipley, you like him with Petey. I actually think the more Petey's played, the less effective Goldobin's been with him, because I think the more confidence Pettersson's gained, the more he needs the puck. And it's tough to have enough puck to go around between the two, which is why I think see if they can find a way to make him work with Horvat is something that they need to give a good, hard, long look. And that's not just 1 or 2 games at a time. That's giving him a shot on that line going forward for 2-3 weeks at a time, and see if they can build on the little chemistry that they do have. And it looks like that's what they're going with tonight. It looks like Roussel, Horvat, and Goldobin are aligned. So hopefully we can see that going forward, because I think if they can find a way to give the Horvat line a little more offensive creativity, that'll do wonders for the Canucks going forwards.
And Horvat and both Horvat and Roussel are good enough defensively that they can balance Goldie's ineffectiveness in the defensive zone to allow him to be a bit better. So I do agree. I think he's a better fit with Horvat, and I think that he needs some lengthy time. But just to play devil's advocate a little bit, I'm not defending Travis Green here, but we look at what happened with Ben Hutton last year, and this was brought up in that clip. Ben Hutton was a healthy scratch a number of times last year. And I'm not saying it's the same thing, because it was about Hutton's, basically, in essence, Hutton's conditioning. Hutton came out this year, and I would say that he's the most improved Canuck. So, how is this with Goldie a little bit different?
Yeah, I mean, this is a good question, right? Like, I think about the Hutton thing, too. I was surprised at how much of a difference there was in Hutton's game. You can also go back to Sven Berchi, a really good example. And the other Tyler was saying, 1 or 2 games can really send a message. And I think that's what happened with Berchi. Like, it would usually be 1 game. I think it happened twice, and it was 1 game. And both times, Sven came back and was better. He noticeably improved. So I do think, there is precedent for tough love being effective. I also think that you got to know your players. Some players, it's the carrot and stick thing. Some players do well with the carrot, some do well with the stick. And the book on Goldobin for a long time has been that he doesn't respond well to tough love, that's not effective with him. Like it or not, if the goal is to make your roster effective, it doesn't seem like that's what clicks with him. It seems like, he responds, the quote that the Canucks leaked where he said, "Why are you picking on me?" And I didn't like that they leaked that, because I think, that obviously is going to make people dislike. That doesn't look good. It makes Goldie look like a jerk. But at times I think he's had a point. There's a lot of players on this team that have defensive gaffes, and Brock Besser is one of them, and he really gets a free pass, obviously because he's an amazing offensive player, but and his production hasn't fallen off, unlike Goldie's. But nevertheless, you watch Brock's game, and he's making 2 or 3 really egregious defensive mistakes most nights, and not, I don't think anyways, being dragged in the same way that Goldie is. So when Goldie says, "Why are you picking on me?" I think he has, at least to a certain extent, he has a point. And I also think that says to me, this isn't really working well. This approach isn't working well. Maybe you dangle a carrot. Maybe you say, look, if I get 2 or 3 nights in a row where you don't make a big defensive mistake, then I'm going to give you a shot. I'll give you a couple games on the top power play unit. Which I think Goldie usually handles himself pretty well in the power play. And I'm sure he'd love to get on there and try to get some points. So, I'd like to see more of a carrot approach rather than the stick, because I do think that there is room for his game to improve. As a defender of Goldie, I have never once said, that he doesn't need to get better in a few areas. But I just want to know that the end goal actually is that we get a more effective Nikolai Goldobin, because I do think that he's a player that can add something, bring something to this lineup that you don't find that easily, especially as a puck distributor. And to the point that Sean was making about where to play him, I do like him with Pettersson and Besser, especially I think with Besser, it's an underrated part of that connection, but Besser's a shooter, he's a sniper, and Goldie is a guy that can get Besser the puck, and I like that. But I also agree. I mean, ultimately, long term, Goldie's got to be able to be effective on at least two lines, right? You have to be able to move him up and down when there's injuries, when there's roster changes and whatnot. So I'd love to see him get a run of 4, 5, 6 games playing with Bo, ideally with another maybe more skilled winger than Roussel. I'm not trying to drag Roussel, but a more skilled player on the line. I'd love to see Bo, Goldie, and Brock for a while, just to see how that sort of looked. So yeah, I mean, I really hope that the Canucks figure it out with Goldie, and that Goldie figures it out with the Canucks, because I think it would be in everyone's best interest.
Yeah, I know you're a big proponent of Goldobin on the first power play unit. My issue with that is I don't know where he fits, because right with the current setup, because they run that 1-3-1, and you can't, Pettersson's best on the half boards, and Besser's the best as the off-wing shooter. And you're not going to put Goldobin down in the down low net front presence area. And he hasn't been the best at being that bumper guy, because teams and goalies don't respect his shot enough for people to open up plays down low in that setup. Is there another setup that you think that could work to create a spot for Goldobin?
No, and I think you make a really good point, and I've sort of grappled with this too. Early in the season, when I guess it was Brock hurt early in the year? Yeah, Brock was hurt early in the year, because Goldie was in Brock's spot, and it meant that we lost that option of having Besser's shot there. But I liked Goldie there. I thought he played well there. I thought he was setting up some good passes. The problem is, and I think everyone is correct on this, the Canucks just need to have two serious shooters. They need to have Pettersson and Besser on either side, and both be a legitimate threat to score there. So in the current setup, the 1-3-1, I agree. I don't think there's a spot for Goldie that makes sense. I'd be interested in sort of trying a different setup where rather than having a Levo or a Bo in front, you sort of have Goldie slide down, kind of the way that the Sedins used to run the sort of the half right beside the net there. I liked elements of that setup. I think if you ever had injury to someone in the top line right now, I'd like to see them adjust and try that. But I agree with you. Until Goldie can be a threat to just beat a goaltender with his shot, you can't use him in that place. And I think I said this just the other night. One thing I'd really like to see would be that instead of Goldie being dragged all the time about his defense, let's get on him about his shot. I mean, let's say, look, this is an offensive player, and we need to be able to get more from him. So we need him to work on his shot. Do the 12-step thing that Elias did with his, or whatever, 12 or whatever, 12 motions, whatever it was, and break down his shot, and let's get Goldie sniping a bit better. To me, that would add more value to him than harping on making sure he doesn't lose his coverage. Anyways, I've said my bit about the defense thing. It's a good point you make about the power play, and I do think Goldie would need to make some adjustments before he could be a staple on the current power play.
And it's a good point about the shot.
Few players that need that.
Oh, go ahead, Sean.
Players that would benefit from the Pettersson 12-step shot improvement program.
Yeah, I'd like to see him in a clinic.
Goldobin, Stetcher, and then even Quinn Hughes coming up. I think if all three of those guys can get better shots and become legit threats with their shot, then that power play could become an absolutely deadly power play.
But you know what I'm liking about Stetcher, though, specifically when you're talking about shot, he doesn't have a great shot, per se, but he's finding a way to use his shot in a smart way. It's not a powerful shot, but it has thrown him on the power play the last week anyway, has thrown some teams off a little bit. Not because he has a powerful shot, but he's smart with the puck. And I think that's what you're saying with it. It's not like it has to be such a super hammer it through the goalie's pads. It just needs to be a smart shot.
and smart decision making with the shot, because one of the major issues with that many fans, especially on Twitter, have with the Canucks power play is like whoever's on that top point, whether it's Edler, Hutton, or Stetcher, they're not passing it to Besser or Pedersen enough for their liking. And that's one of the issues, is because none of those players really have a really good shot at this point, and both Besser and Pedersen have absolutely killer shots, is that a lot of the time those the teams are taking away those passing lanes and leaving that shot lane open, and knowing that because the top of that power play isn't much of a threat to score on a one shot, they're opening up that shot lane and letting their goalie see it, so that they can make that save and either kick it into the corner or suck up the rebound.
You almost need to have like a point man, really good shot, only so that point man can ideally distribute the puck to other shooters, right? It's really ironic, but I mean, you actually do need to have someone who the other team respects their shot from the point in order to draw the defense, to draw the box in, so that you can actually set up those shots from the wings. Yeah, it's a sort of strange irony.
Which, Tyler Noble, did you have anything to add to that, or?
No, I just think it's well covered. I mean, I like the point about, look, if this is an offensive player, let's work on the offensive strengths, work on trying to improve his shot, give him, something more dynamic in that regard. I guess I do have the question, and I guess it's an obvious one, but, like Travis Green is kind of an older school guy. He's very defensively oriented, it seems like. Are Green and Goldobin a fit long term? You have to wonder about that right now, but I certainly hope the organization doesn't throw in the towel on Goldobin, because, like I said earlier, I think the potential's there.
Well, it's the interesting thing, what I'm hearing, or this is the theme that I'm coming up with here, and I don't think this has been talked enough about necessarily, but let's look at Hutton, Virtanen, and Goldobin have all been in a communication conversation, that's the best way to put it, with Travis Green in some way, shape, or form. Hutton last year, Virtanen at the start, and now Goldie. So I think is it maybe a fair question at some point to ask the question about Travis Green's communication style? Is it beneficial going forward in this rebuild to be the way he is? I mean, I guess you're seeing progress with Hutton, but are we seeing that with Goldie and Virtanen? And going forward, you've got Quinn Hughes coming, you've got potentially Olli Juolevi coming. Who knows? You've got some other guys coming here. I don't know. It feels like that's the underrated conversation here a little bit. Is how is Travis Green communicating to the kids?
I think he's got one style, and it's going to work with some and not work with others.
Go ahead.
And that was... Sorry, I keep cutting you off. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, so I think it's worked with Hutton, and it's worked with Virtanen. Whether or not it works with Goldobin is up in the air, and I don't think we're going to see Goldobin move anywhere unless someone really likes his potential and overpays, because I think they're looking at next season as the payoff for all this, just like they had with Virtanen and Hutton in the past.
Yeah, and I actually wrote something about a year ago on this where I said, look, the real test for Travis Green is precisely a player like Goldobin, because, Travis Green has nothing to do with Elias Pettersson's success. I mean, Elias is going to be Elias. He's going to be amazing regardless. There are players where there's not much Travis can do to get more out of them, right? I mean, I think we've seen the ceiling. I keep picking on Tyler Mott, and I don't mean to, because I actually really like Tyler Mott in a fourth-line role, and I think we've seen his ceiling. We've seen what he can do this year in that role. But, I mean, Travis isn't going to get more out of him. There's not more to get. It's a player like Goldobin, and I think Jake also fits into this category. But it's players like that where you can see that there is more. You can see there's a ton of potential. But you can also, there's a darker timeline where Goldobin washes out of the NHL, where his potential is never realized, where he just sort of can't find it, can't put it together with the right team and the right coach at the right time, and then his moment passes, and his potential never gets realized, and he sort of becomes a footnote. So to me, like in assessing when we assess Travis long term, I think it should be based on those bubble players. I think Ole Ulevi is going to be another of those. I think sort of in between guys where where you think that this could be a really good player, but he could also sort of not pan out. And that'll be the real test for Travis. I don't know. For me, the jury's still out. I've been frustrated with it at times with his approach, but you can't argue with the Hutton thing. And he unlike Willie Desjardins, Travis has shown a willingness to be flexible, to sort of change his mind on things, and I think that's a good thing. So. Yeah, I don't know. My jury is definitely still out on Travis. I haven't really decided either way.
I'd be interested. That's a topic going forward. But speaking of defense, and really this blends into a little bit what we're talking about with Travis Green. We got to finally see Brisebois play against Los Angeles after a number of opportunities that he has been scratched for a number of situations. Edler's now out. Chris Tanev went down in the Anaheim game. Unsure what his status is. The name Quinn Hughes popped in excited Twitter on Wednesday. Where are we right now with the Canucks defense? We're not going to get into specific deadline things here, but what are we seeing? I mean, I think Hutton and Stetcher have been nice stories, but what about the other four spots on this team?
Yeah, you're looking at the Canucks who have an older pair in Edler and Tanev that are really good, but a little too old for where the core is at this point. Hutton and Stetcher have been fantastic this year, have really stepped up their games and proven themselves to be good second pair defensemen. And then the rest leaves a lot to be desired. You've got Eric Branson, who just doesn't seem to fit the new NHL. You've got Alex Biega, who's a good number 7 guy who has one good game, then one bad game, then one good game, then one bad game. And then you've got a bunch of younger guys who just, I think, need a shot. Brisebois looked good in the first game. You got Ashton Sautner and Jalen Chatfield in Utica that are going to probably get a look here before the end of the season. And now they just called up Luke Shen, who I think a lot of people have hopes for, that they can either somehow parlay a pick out of him, or even he could replace Goodbranson at some point, because they basically are the same player. Big, physical, willing to throw down the mitts when needed, but just isn't necessarily a defenseman that fits the new game.
Yeah, Goodbranson is kind of an ongoing frustration for me, but they need that toughness there. He is willing to scrap. They don't have a lot of toughness. But beyond this season, who knows what the plans are for Goodbranson? I could see the Canucks moving on from him.
I feel like they have to. I worry about a trade deadline coming and going without anything on the Goodbranson file, because do I agree with JD Burke that he is the worst defenseman in the NHL? It seems harsh, but he's got to be near it. He's got to be near the bottom. And I always feel bad because I actually really like the guy. Having watched him for these last few years and kind of gotten to the way that you sort of get to know the players a little bit in this context, like he seems like a really decent guy, a decent person. I always get the sense that he's given it everything he's got out there. You know, I think that he respects his teammates. He respects his opponents. I mean, I think he's a really decent dude. And so I always sort of feel bad for the heat that he takes. But at the same time, I mean, my God, how many icings can we watch every night? How many bullet passes that no one could possibly receive? You know, how many there's so like lost coverages, you know, like losing the puck, chasing a hit and then losing the player. Like there's just so many things. And I mean, I'm sure you guys may have talked about this already, but boy, wasn't Brisebois thrown to the wolves in his first game being paired with Gutty. I mean, just what a tough draw. And honestly, I thought he availed himself pretty well considering. So I really think they have to try to do something, get anything for Goodbranson, try to get a deal with Florida or another team that still places probably too much value in that type of player. And then look, going forward, yeah, you got Quinn Hughes coming, you've got Yoel Levy coming, Stetcher and Hutton, I think are both locks to be in the top four for a while at least. So, I mean, I think you've got a lot of room to start moving some of like the Guttys and the Pouliot's out of here if you can. That's another guy, Pouliot. I mean, I'm not sure what you guys think of his game, but I wanted to like him. I wanted to see. I really believed there was another level to his game that he could add something. And he looks rough. He just doesn't. He just does not. It's not clicking.
Yeah, I think he's another player who doesn't necessarily do well with the stick approach of coaching that Travis Green relies upon. And I don't think he's as bad as everyone makes him out to be, but especially when he's paired with Goodbranson, it's a train wreck out there. There's just they don't read the game at the speed and the level that you need to at the NHL level right now. It's just it's quite obvious to me that the game's too fast for both those guys.
I would say both with Biega and Pouliot, my feeling's the same. In small doses, I can deal with them, but the more they're relied upon, the more troubling it gets.
Yeah, Biega too. You know, the thing about Biega, one of you guys, I think it was Tyler, said that he's a good seventh defenseman or eighth. I mean, I actually really like him in that role precisely because it always seems like his first game back into the lineup is a banger, right? He comes in and he's hitting and he's skating and he's taking shots. Like he always seems to have a really good game his first game back, right? He's just jacked. And then if he plays 2 or 3 in a row, by the second or third game, you know, he's invisible and or making big mistakes. So I like him in that role. I like him in that sort of depth role. And I would keep Biega over Goodbranson, Pouliot. Yeah, I mean, I just think, especially Goody. It's just we gotta bite the bullet here. You know, suffer the loss if necessary. You know, I know we paid a lot for the guy, but he's got to go.
What do you do? What do you do with Tanev going forward?
I think that's such a contentious subject because depending on where you think the Canucks are in the rebuild and when you expect them to be contending, will change your answer. On this podcast, I've said that I want to see the Canucks gun for 2 to 3 years from now, and I think with the way Tanev plays, I think he's a great partner for Quinn Hughes or Ole Levy to insulate them from the NHL and be a bit of a safety net for them. But you still need to find a way to add some more assets and some more bullets to the chamber in terms of trying to find another some more skill and high-end skill to this team that is desperately needed.
Well, the other problem with Tanev is his injury history. I mean, he doesn't play 82 games. I don't think going forward any team will expect him, even if you're trading him, to play 82 games. That's the other difficulty with him is I'm not saying he's not reliable. You can't rely him for every game, but he's, I think, a top 4 defenseman on this team if he's in the lineup.
He's a top 4 defenseman on any team.
I agree.
When he's healthy.
I agree, and I've been a huge fan of the 10-man forever. But I do think that if you look at his numbers this year, it's worrying because he's really dropped off. Now it could be an anomaly. I mean, it happens, right? And obviously, yeah, the injuries, depending on which injury, when, and pairings and so on. Like, there's lots of possible explanations for it. I would have traded him last year. I would have tried to move him last year when I think his value was still pretty high, and there were teams that would have been. I think, anyways, I would have thought teams that would have been interested. I wouldn't. I mean, I think this year his value is a lot lower, probably lower than it should be. So, I mean, I do think the Canucks need to move on from Tanev before it's sort of too late. But I worry that he's had such a rough year this season. And I think we've probably all said this at some point. He's undervalued around the league and always has been. In Vancouver, we've known how good he is, how reliable, how steady. For some reason, he just doesn't seem to have the cachet around the league, doesn't get a lot of credit elsewhere. And I think that's it's unfortunate from the Canucks standpoint because, he actually, you guys said top four, and I agree. I think he is a top four defenseman usually. But I don't know if his value is as a top four defenseman around the league, it's strange. But I do think that's probably got to be part of the consideration.
Well, let's see. So 14-15, he played 70 games, 15-16, 69 games, 53 in 16-17, 42 last year, 53 at this point this year. 120 blocks, though, which is, that's I think, pretty valuable. Not like it's his highest certainly in the last 3 years, but he's played a little bit more. It's tough to move on from a Tanev, though, when you have Branson may be a nice guy, but I'm sure he's a wonderful human being. And I don't know if it's in part because this guy had so much potential brought to him, but he simply, you can't play. I don't think you can play Gudbranson. You shouldn't be playing Gudbranson more than 10 minutes a night. And Gudbranson should probably be in your press box more often than not, no question. But that's the problem with moving on from a Tanev is you have a Gudbranson in the back there.
Just going back to Tanev for a second and being underappreciated, I mean, I would say it's pretty simple. The ones that have high cachet around the league are the ones that score.
Yeah,
Tanev doesn't score very much, and he's playing in a West Coast market, so it's easy for him to get sort of overlooked with all the other D-men around the league.
Yeah, and the fact that it's so the idea of moving Tanev in is great in more of an ideal world, but when you look at the depth on the right side, it's scary without him. Like right now, what do the Canucks have? They've got Stetcher, good Branson, can be good, can be. So I think one of the big shoes that needs to drop here, if the idea of Tanev, the idea of Tanev being traded is going to become more of a reality to the management, is to see what they have in Jalen Chatfield.
Yeah, that
is the big one right now. Is see what you have with him at the NHL level, and see if he's a potential bottom pair defenseman who can grow into a top four guy going forwards. Because if he can, then that does open the opportunity to move a Tanev a lot easier than right now, where you just would decimate what you have on the right side.
Yeah, that, or I mean, the other option is go out and spend on a really serious top level, try to draw an Erik Karlsson. I mean, it's a bit of a pipe dream. I don't think Erik Karlsson wants to come to Vancouver, but we saw Petey talking to him there at the All-Star game, right? I mean, you never know. I do think that long term the Canucks need one more blue chip defenseman. I don't think, and I don't mean any disrespect to Chatfield, but I don't think there's anything in the system beyond Hughes and Ulevy that is really going to be an NHL defenseman right now. So I'd love to see them go out and instead of doing the thing where they sort of spend, what did they spend last summer? $12 million, on three sort of fourth line type players. Put all of that into one really good player, and then if it's a defenseman, I think that would solve your Tanev problem. Obviously, it depends on what's out there. Depends on the asking price and whether you can draw them to Vancouver, whether you can sell them on Vancouver. But hey, Pettersson, it does change the equation. I mean, he's the most exciting player in the NHL, even in a West Coast market. I think the buzz around Pettersson is enough that could help. That could help Jim attract an Erik Karlsson type player. And I that's something I'd be open to for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah, an Erik Karlsson, or if that's not an option, even a Tyler Myers is something that to look at.
Yeah, that's
for sure.
There's some interesting options out there, I think, defensively for sure going forward. This week also, of course, the day to debut, I'm sorry, I have trouble calling him Mikey Dipietro. It feels weird, but the Dipietro start. But we also had Zach McEwen start this week. He played 3 games. He got a couple points against San Jose. I did not think he looked out of place at all. Actually, I thought yeah, the San Jose game was a bit of garbage time, but I think he's found his way to fit in really well on this team. I don't know what you guys think, but I think it's been a good start for Zach McEwen. And maybe a little too late.
And just to go back to the talk we had earlier about the potential roster moves, they have put Virtanen on IR.
Okay.
So McEwen's here for at least a little bit longer. And he brings size. He brings, if you watch him play down low, he's a beast. Like there's not going to be many players who can move him off the puck once he gets going down in the corners. And then they've actually already started putting him on his net presence on the second power play unit as well. I think they found something with him, and they need to see how much they can get out of him. I think he's going to be a good sort of third line player who can play power play minutes in that net presence. So I think fans should get excited over what they have, what the Canucks have with Keelan.
Whoever's next, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I've liked Zach's game. I don't know that I am as bullish as some people. I think I have a bit of shell shock from some of the other times we've got really, really excited about depth wingers. The Darren Archibald hype train, was pretty wild. It was pretty raucous for a few weeks there. And Darren Archibald didn't really pan out into much long term. I think the real test will be, actually, in some ways, I think it's a good thing let me rephrase that. It's not a good thing that Jake is out. I'm really disappointed that Jake is out. But if that means that we get a longer look at McEwen, I'm here for it. I'm okay with that because I'm not as excited, I think, probably as Sean, but I want to be. I want to get there. And what I would need to see a couple weeks of him playing at the level that he played in these first 2 games. I do think that he looked really strong out there. He looked fast. He looked faster than I anticipated. And I agree, he didn't look out of place. At times for sure he did, especially in the San Jose game. But he didn't look more out of place than several of the regulars this season. So I liked it. I liked the first 2 games, but I think that's it's the old sample size problem. I want to see a couple weeks. I want to see whether he still looks as good 2 weeks from now as he did in those first 2 games. And if he does, then yeah, I mean, what a find, what an amazing sort of unearthing. And those are the best stories, right? I mean, the Burrows narrative, it's always such a satisfying narrative when you get a player like that who sort of comes out of nowhere. So I'm optimistic, but I'm pretty cautious still.
I'm of the same sort there. What an assist in your debut game is good. It was a blowout loss. Hasn't particularly looked out of place to me either. But that's the sample size thing is the thing, right? A couple of weeks, you'll get a better idea of what the guy really is about.
Yeah, we'll see. Kind of thinking
the thing with McEwen as opposed to Archibald, I think he to me, he thinks the game better than Archibald, and he uses his size better than Archibald. Archibald would throw a big hit here or there, and then you wouldn't see him for a while, and then he wasn't able to control the puck down low the way McEwen can. So that's what separates him from Archibald for me. I was never really high on Archibald like a lot of people were, just because of that. I didn't think he didn't think the game well enough, and he didn't skate well enough to be the impact player that a lot of people were wanting from him and hoping to see from him. And I see that and that's what I see from McEwen. And yeah, it's sample size is big. Can he keep it up? He's got the size to be able to keep it up, and he doesn't play overly physical either, which is fine. Which is what I don't think you need to be that way in today's NHL, because the puck moves so quickly that if you try and run around and throw checks, you're just going to put yourself out of position. So I think he's a smart player. I think he knows how to use his size in the new NHL, and he's got underrated skills with the puck.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, and I think. That's why I like you. I was never that cranked up about Archibald, but in this case, I mean, I am cautiously optimistic. He reminds me of, I think probably just because of his size, but I have these visions of like a Brian Boyle sort of player who can, protect the puck really well, win those battles, but also, has some hands, right? And that's the sense I've got from McEwen, and I also have gotten that from reading about him. From comments Corey, because Corey is really, really high on McEwen and has been all year. And so I agree. Like, I think that there's way more potential for McEwen to pan out than Archibald. But I still, I got to see it first,
So imagine this just for a second here, going forward. And if you're a Canucks fan, I think there's something to it. You got Petey and Besser. You've got Horvat and potentially Virtanen. And then there was this tweet from Sean after the Kings game. Adam Gaudette's Canucks' future 3 centerman. Hell, he's the best option currently for a third center. He looks like he was about to break up before he got sent down, and now is. Canucks are set down the middle for years. Are you guys, everyone in agreement? Gaudette has a bit of Kessler in him, not as surly so far, but I feel that a combination of Gaudette and McEwen going down the years with a combination of Petey and Besser and a Horvat Virtanen maybe, or Horvat and Goldie, however you want to look at that, feels to me in this NHL, if you can have 3 centers, you're in great shape. And to me, Adam Gaudette is already right now doing Brandon Sutter things better than Brandon Sutter. I don't know what your guys' thoughts are.
Well, he can stay in the lineup a lot more consistently. He doesn't seem to be, and knock on wood here, as prone to injury as Brandon Sutter at this point. Gaudette in his first call up there, the extended run wasn't doing a lot, but ever since he's gotten another stint in the AHL and has been recalled, he's just been taking off, I think. Really excited to see what he did the other night against LA. Got a big tie-in goal. Seems comfortable, seems to be improving. There's a lot to be excited about there.
Yeah, my feeling with Gaudette, I've always been a little reluctant to get excited on Gaudette, and I agree. In his extended run earlier in the season, I was pleased that he wasn't a liability. And I at times have felt like Sutter has been a liability, so I didn't feel like Gaudette was a liability. but I also didn't see much. But this time around, there's no denying that he looks faster, and he looks way more confident. And I think both of his, was it a 2 goals or goal and assist? I don't remember. I remember the goal that he got when Pettersson basically took 3 defensemen with him, and then he looks confident. So I kind of feel in a strange way the same way about Gaudette as I feel about Macewan, although obviously I think Gaudette is by far the higher ceiling. But I want to see it. I want to see it this time. I hope he gets a longer run. I would love to see the Canucks find a place to put Sutter. Unfortunately, with the injury, I think that probably makes it less likely that they'll find anything right now. But I'd like Sutter to be sort of moved out, and I'd like Gaudette to take on that role, and just let's see. Let's find out if he can keep that going. I've never really been all that excited about Gaudette, but I'd like to be proven wrong on this one. And he looked great the other night. There's no question about that.
Yeah, he did have an assist there, guys, on the Canucks' second goal. Besser, it was a turnover there in the Kings' end, and he was able to convert that.
Right. Yeah, it was a really nice little cross-crease dish over to Besser. With Gaudette, yeah, he's never going to be a solid top 6 guy, but with the way the Canucks are set up at center, he doesn't need to be. I think his ceiling is going to be a really good third line center, because he's smart enough. He can play. He's smart enough. He's fast enough, and can play a bit a very high tempo tenacity game to be that third line center. He's not. I don't think he'll ever be quite the shutdown guy that they sort of have had Sutter and Beagle play, but the development of Bo Horvat as a bit of a top 6 matchup center, I think creates a spot for Gaudette, and that they don't need that. And to create a third line that's a little more offensive is going to be big for the Canucks as well. So I think that's the way that again, the development of Bo Horvat into a better matchup center, I think opens up that offensive third line role for Gaudette, and he adds depth for the second unit power play.
And that bit about the more offensive third line, like, this is a hobby horse of mine for a long time. I think that the Canucks are a little bit behind the sort of the league on this. The league is moving towards 3 lines that can score. You look at the best teams; they've got third lines that make you nervous, and I think the Canucks need to get on that train. So I really, for that reason, I like the idea of Gaudette taking over Sutter's role. Sutter's been maligned in Vancouver. I've been among the maligners. But look, I mean, he is pretty decent as a shutdown center. I just think we don't need 2 of them, and that's I'm just kind of repeating your point, Sean. But we don't need Beagle and Sutter. One of them will suffice. So I like the idea of Gaudette in that third line, making the third line more offensive. I'd like to see Jake on a line with Gaudette. I'd like to see how those 2 would work together. Because I think Jake has developed the capacity to be responsible defensively, and so he can be in a third line role. But he can score. He can snipe. He's got good hands. So I'd like to see the Canucks move to a third line that has some scoring options. So I do hope that Gaudette's going to stick this time.
See, I think that they need Bo and Virtanen to play more together. I think I really like them together. They have some sort of chemistry. I mean, I agree with you. I think Gaudette, I'd like to see what happens with, but I think I would like to see more Bo Virtanen going forward. But Roussel is a really good fit there. And you want, at this point, it was we talked about earlier in the podcast, we want Goldie, I think, just spend some time with Horvat as well. But so it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, there's 2 big question marks that the Canucks need to fix going forward. One is they need to find a good offensive forward fit for Bo, and then they also need to find a way to fix that
fixed up defense like we were talking about earlier, especially on the right side, because I think the left side is pretty well set going forwards with Edler, Hutton, Hulevi, and Hughes all going to be playing significant parts of the present and future. And then, it's finding a winger for Bo so he doesn't end up being the captain of the helicopter wingers like Kessler was back in the day.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we want to talk about before we end off here? I think we covered a good chunk here.
Just to go back on Canucks roster news, apparently Jake Virtanen is going on injured reserve. He's still with the Canucks in San Jose, according to Jeff Patterson.
Yeah.
So just thought I'd update that. So that looks like the roster move to get Brian Spooner up.
Yeah.
And is there expectation that Shen is going to play tonight? Like, who's Shen going to slot in for?
According to Batch.
Yeah, it looks. Yeah, according to I think I saw earlier Batch with Brendan Batchelor, it looks like he was the seventh defenseman.
Okay.
So I don't think he's coming in tonight. Just because I think Biega played so well last game.
Yeah, makes sense.
I don't think they're going to take Good Branson out anytime soon here.
Looks like the lines at this point: Horvat, Roussel, Goldobin, Pedersen, Levo, Besser, Gaudette, Granlund, Mott, Beagle, Eriksson, McEwen, and Schaller the 13th, Hutton, Stetcher, Brisebois, Branson, Pouliot, Biega, and Shen on as the 7th D, and I'm assuming it's Markstrom tonight. So, yeah. Batch never has the goaltender, but yeah. And to back up Batchelor's pinned tweet, it's not him creating the lines, so quit yelling at him. So Tyler, tell us a little bit more for those who don't know about Canucks Army. What are you guys doing? Things like that.
Canucks Army's I think been a nice addition to the the sort of the second tier media in Vancouver. Obviously, a lot of different people that have written there over the years, but tends to be a bit more analytics positive, I guess, is the word I'd use. But also has a pretty wide range of writers, a lot of different people with a lot of different takes there. Ryan Beach is currently the editor. Very, very solid guy. Really, I think a very reasonable voice generally with respect to Canucks stuff. So, CanucksArmy.com, I think.
It's fascinating you're in Toronto and cover Canucks.
Yeah, I've been a Canucks fan for most of my adult life. I lived in Vancouver for a few years when I was a kid. Grew up in Winnipeg, and so there was a rivalry in the Timu and Pavo years. But I sort of readopted the Canucks in the 90s. Right around the time of the Sedin draft, actually, that was the moment for me. Something about that just was so cool, and I was sort of so interested in the idea of these, brothers getting drafted 2 and 3, and I immediately took to them, and so I sort of adopted Vancouver from there. I used to go down when Vancouver had those playoff series with Minnesota in the early 2000s in the West Coast Express days. I used to drive down to Minnesota from Winnipeg to catch the Canucks in those. So I saw a bunch of those playoff games. So yeah, I've been with the Canucks for a really long time, and the move to Toronto, truthfully, it only deepened it. I'm staying up until it's like 1:00 in the morning when these games finish, and so it's like the depth of commitment is that much more.
Some say it's better than the regular Eastern media out there, but that's a whole other topic.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Sean, Tyler, what are you guys up to? Twitter, whatever.
You can follow me at BeardyConnect03.
And I'm on Twitter at TNoble, TNOBLE.
And Tyler is off to ref another game, so we wish him luck. Thanks, everyone, for coming on. It's great. Follow me, KEBOLE. We will talk again for hockey next week, but Monday we are starting the Marvel reviews from the beginning the Iron Man 1, Mitch Milani from Bottom Line View, and I are going to review all of them up to the Avengers Endgame. So it'll be a lot of fun, so check that out. Well, the first one will be out on Monday, but we'll talk to you all very soon. Bye for now.